Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Alan Miller, and we have a return guest with us today, Mark Heaney, who is a consumer protection attorney, really protects the consumer, protects all of you from a lot of things like abusive debt collectors and robocalls to your cell phone and things like that. So how goes the debt protection business? What can you do when you get an abusive debt collector?
Well, first, thanks for having me back, Alan. It's always good to be on your program, and we stay incredibly busy protecting consumers from debt collection abuses, predatory lenders, and the rest. I think I'm amazed at times that these problems continue with the debt collection industry. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars of debt that is out there, that it makes its way into the hands of debt collection agencies, attorneys that do debt collection work, and the abuses are rampant still in the industry.
I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when stores or businesses have bad debts, they sell them. They sell the rights often to debt collectors, and debt collectors who are really supposed to be bound by some pretty strict laws, will do all kinds of abuses, make all kinds of threats, tell people they're going to close their bank account, they're going to get their car, they're going to do things far beyond what they're allowed to do.
Absolutely. I think people need to understand when you have an account with a store, a credit card account or something, if you are late on those payments or if you don't make those payments for a period of time, they will attempt to collect that debt in-house with their own collection. Then they may assign it to a debt collection agency, an outside agency. But ultimately that debt will be charged off and then sold to debt buyers, companies that specialize in buying distressed debt. And at that point, also, it gets put either their own collector's call or it gets put in the hands of debt collection agencies. So they're incredibly...
The retailer maybe gets a percentage on the dollar. I don't know. It's not very much. But then the debt collector gets nothing unless the debt collector turns that into money.
Yeah, I've seen debts sold for as little as 3 cents on the dollar. That meaning that a debt buyer is buying a dollar of debt for 3 cents, meaning that anything they're able to collect over 3 cents is all profit. And so there's an enormous incentive to make people pay those debts. And so that is, and then not to mention that a lot of the collection employees, the actual people that are calling, trying to collect those debts, are also often working, nearly always, on a contingency fee, a contingency basis, but a percentage of what they bring in goes into their pocket. So all the incentives are set up for abuses. Fortunately, we have a federal law called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which dictates the tactics, what a debt collector can and cannot do in attempting to collect a debt. And I've seen everything under the sun, from abusive language to threats to take Social Security money. I have seen trying to inflate amounts to collect an amount that a person doesn't really owe. I've seen them try to collect debts that have been paid off before. The list of those things they can't do is very, very long, but they don't follow it very often.
And particularly when the economy was down, there had to be a lot more people who are getting hounded because people lose their jobs, they can't pay their bills.
Sure.
And ultimately, it ends up in the hands of a debt collector. So the debt collector calls you at home. What's the first thing you should do?
Well, I think anytime a debt collector calls you, my belief is that people should deal with debt collectors through written communication. I think the first thing that I would do is send a letter to that debt collection agency asking for validation of the debt. Send me everything that you have that indicates that I owe this money, that you actually own this debt, and send it to me immediately under the FDCPA.
Do they have to do that?
They have to do that. If you provide it within 30 days, notice a request for validation within 30 days, they do have to send that to you. And they can't continue collection efforts until they do that. So I think that's the first thing to do. I think also in that letter you should put down, I do not wish to be contacted by telephone anymore. Don't contact me. When a debt collector receives a letter from a consumer saying, do not contact me any longer, they can't contact you by phone anymore. That's it. It's over. If they do, it's a violation of the federal law, and you have a lawsuit against them.
So you want to make sure that you have a copy of whatever you send to them.
Send it by certified mail, return receipt requested. You want evidence that they received it, they got it, so that you can have that with you.
How about sending it by email?
No.
Doesn't work?
I suppose there are arguments that can be made that would be, but I think a written letter signed by you, make a copy of the letter, put it in an envelope, send it by certified mail, return receipt requested, you go to the post office, get those documents, something that proves that they got it. That is the way that I think that is the best practice for doing that. And then I would take a look at what gets sent back. And you got to go through your records and make sure that what they are asking you to pay is a legitimate debt. Have fees been added on that were not contracted for initially? Are they charging interest? Well, what gives them the right to check that interest? Is that in the original agreement? Do they believe that there's some legal or statutory basis for being able to charge that interest? I think you need to go through all those things and then also ask them, well, in the case of a debt buyer, well, how did you get this debt and how can you show me that you actually own this? Because I don't want to pay you and then have 6 months later from now another debt collection agent saying, well, we bought this debt, not that person. So these things, it happens. I'm in business in large part because these abuses continue to happen. So I think people need to pay attention to all these things. And I think it can be very stressful for people. I think that it's intimidating to have someone call you. It's embarrassing for someone to be calling. But I don't think that people should just willy-nilly, in an effort to just make it stop, start making arrangements and paying debts, especially if they're debts they don't believe are accurate.
Or if they have the wrong person.
Oh,
that happens all the time, and it happened to me, where somebody with the same name but with the different middle initial, living in a different locality, and the fellow who called said, give me your social security number. And I said, I'm not giving you any social security number. Give me the last 4 numbers of the debt you're trying to collect. And he did, and I said, that's not me. Those aren't my numbers.
I think you made a wise choice there, because what he wants you to do is to give you a social security number, then he can enter that into the system and make it your debt. So I think that's wise.
I give it to nobody.
Yeah, in the last year, I've had 6 separate cases of people that were receiving repeated phone calls from debt collectors on their cell phones for debts that weren't theirs. They were looking for the wrong people.
Now, isn't there a new law about cell phones and calling on cell phones?
Yeah, and there is a federal law called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and among many things, it regulates automatic telephone dialing systems. These are robocalls to cell phone. That's the way that companies can make thousands and thousands of calls over and over and over again to all their debtors or whoever they want to call. And then when a person picks up, then it just gets shot right to to a collection agent or other agent on the phone. So the Telephone Consumer Protection Act protects people from that law. It also contains the do not call list, which people are familiar with. But in regards to cell phones, what it says is you may not call a person's cellular telephone using an automatic telephone dialing system without their prior express consent. It also includes pre-recorded calls. So if you pick up your cell phone and you hear an automated voice on there, those are illegal. And in response, if you get these calls and you haven't given your express consent to be receiving them, you're entitled to $500 per call. $1,500 if a court makes a determination that it was willful, that this company was willfully violating the law.
And that's when you seek out an attorney, and that's when you start a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And what about attorney's fees on those cases?
Well, in the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, there is not an attorney fee shifting provision, meaning the defendant would have to pay attorney's fees. But I, like all attorneys in this area, do those on a contingency fee basis, so people aren't going to be paying me any fees unless we recover. I take a percentage of the recovery. It allows me to represent them. We take on all the risk. We pay all the filing fees. If there ends up being expert witnesses, these things, we front those costs. And if the case doesn't work out, there's nothing recovered.
How often do those cases go to trial as opposed to having the debt company settle it?
Well, I can say that infrequently, to say the least. They don't. They are pretty, there's not a lot of dispute once you get through the discovery process. You find out what machine or equipment the company is using to call a person's cellular telephone. So there's not a lot of dispute about those issues. It's not a big factual dispute. I think that they're from the standpoint of proving pretty simple to prove up. So I think the message to people is, if you are getting repeated calls to your cellular telephone in what appears to be from a auto dialer, and the way you can tell if an auto dialer is calling you is there's usually a little delay when you pick up. Have you ever picked up a phone and there's a little bit delay before the agent or whoever a person comes on the line? That means that it's an auto dialed call. Or if you're getting calls on your cell phone and there's a pre-recorded voice that says, "Is this such and such? Press 1 for this." I think that if you're getting those calls, and you should call a person like myself, you should investigate this, because I've had clients who have had 500 calls, and they never gave permission to have these phone calls to their cellular telephones.
What about calling somebody on the job?
Well, under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and we're talking about the collection of debts here, you may not call a person's place of employment if you know you're not supposed to call there. So that would be two things. Number one, if you're told not to call a person's place of employment, or the debt collector has reason to know that it would be an inconvenient place to contact someone. So my argument would be, if someone is a nurse or works at a nursing home or some other type of jobs where it would really be an inconvenience, they shouldn't call at all. But certainly, after a person a debt collector has been told, you may not call my workplace, that's it. It should never happen
And
again.
it's actionable after that.
It is actionable after that. I think people, if they are getting calls at their workplace, should contact someone, contact an attorney right away. I've had, I've had cases early on in my career. I had a case where a debt collector repeatedly was calling the receptionist at my client's workplace over and over and over again, asking to speak with my client. They had been told not to call before. Then they started calling reception, asking to talk to my client's boss, okay? Knowing that the message would get back to her saying, hey, they're calling now for your boss. And you can imagine what that does to someone's workplace. It's embarrassing, it's distracting. It makes it incredibly difficult to work. So that was a case that we got a sizable recovery, because it's just so egregious, and I think people can understand that. Regardless, and I think the important thing is, regardless
so there is
of
light at the end of the tunnel, is what you're saying,
Yeah.
if you're willing to, undertake it.
Yeah, I think one of the major points to make to people is that even if you owe the debt, even if it is yours, you're still protected by these laws. The fact that you owe debt does not mean that someone can treat you disrespectfully, dishonestly, violate the law, add on fees you don't owe, try to collect more than you actually owe. They can't do that, and there's no crime in being in debt, especially after the last 5 years that we've gone through with kind of an economic collapse that really has left a lot of people just trying to dig themselves out right now. And yes, students that are in debt because of obscene tuition bills and such. So I think people need to recognize that you have rights. There's a way to stop the harassment and at least let you get your feet under you so that you can start figuring out what is the best way to deal with this.
Another thing that people might not do that they can do is really talk to an attorney like yourself and see if you can negotiate some sort of a settlement. Suppose they actually owe the debt, but they're they're out of work at the moment, something like that. You have had success in negotiating payments and or a lower amount, and most stores, most businesses will take that rather than go through the collection procedure.
Yeah, the vast majority of my practice is litigation, suing the abusive debt collectors. I have helped people who have been sued over debts before look into whether or not they have defenses to those debts, whether the debts are legitimate, and then ultimately, if they want, and we can come to some type of resolution with the other side, to help them come to some type of settlement with the company that's attempting to collect the debt. I think the important thing for people to know about debt settlement is there are a lot of companies on the radio, on television saying, we're going to settle your debt, consolidate your debt. These are very expensive programs. They don't help people. The Attorney General's office, it's one of the top complaints that both the Attorney General's office, the FTC, and a number of companies get, that these companies that say that they're going to help you, solve all your problems, you consolidate your debt, we'll do all this, they end up taking a lot of fees.
They're going to solve your problem, and the first thing they ask for is money up front.
Exactly. And
Which
saying,
adds to your problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that money is better spent helping you and your family, and then ultimately paying off some of these debts if possible. But then also, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, but I would tell people sometimes you need a second chance in life to get restarted. Things happen that you can't anticipate, that people should talk to a reputable bankruptcy attorney that can give them an honest opinion about whether or not they think bankruptcy is right for them. And that's a matter of figuring out, is there a way to get out from under this debt? Because if you can't, and you never are going to, then it's probably a good idea to at least get a fresh start. You look at the number of Fortune 500 companies and millionaires and billionaires that have taken advantage of bankruptcy laws before. I don't think any person should ever feel ashamed of needing a second chance. So I don't do bankruptcy, but I think certainly contacting the National Association of Consumer Bankruptcy Lawyers or the Minnesota State Bar Association can put people in touch with a reputable person who's really going to sit down and talk about the pros and cons of that.
Now, there's another sort of a practice out there that's come under a lot of publicity and scrutiny called payday lenders.
Sure, payday.
These are people who take money, they will give you money up front for you to pay back at payday, but the interest rates are sometimes unbelievable.
I think that the payday lending industry it likes to appear like they're mom and pop shops, that they're just small little businesses. This is big billion-dollar business, and they're small short-term loans. At least they're advertised that way, with enormous interest rates. The problem is
there
that people get caught in a cycle of never being able to pay off the debt.
Is there no amount of interest that's restricted?
Minnesota has a very good payday lending law, and the law and the loans that are really covered are those under $1,000. Okay, and there are strict limits on the amount of interest that can be paid on those loans. The biggest problem and the biggest violators of that are online payday lenders on the internet. People are out looking for loans or whatnot. Those companies are not licensed by the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota. That's part of the law. The law says if you're going to be a payday lender, or we call it a consumer small loan lender, you need to be licensed with the Minnesota Department of Commerce. If you're not licensed by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, the loan is void, and the person can sue you to recover all the interest principal, any amounts they've paid, plus their attorney's fees and statutory damages. So I think that the number one thing that a person should do is not take out payday lending, payday loans. That is clear.
If they can possibly avoid it, avoid it.
If they can possibly do it. Secondly, I think that the brick and mortar shops in the state are certainly better at following the law than the online payday lenders. I would tell people never to get a loan over the internet. If you absolutely must get a payday loan, you got to go to the Minnesota Department of Commerce's website, look under the license tool, and see that they are licensed in the state of Minnesota. Because if they're not, they are not going to be charging you the interest rates that are allowed under law, and they very likely are not going to be giving you the disclosures that are required under the law. So I think checking to make sure that these payday lenders are licensed is number one. If there are listeners who have taken out payday loans over the internet in the past, are paying those back, or have now determined that this loan had interest rates that were outrageous, they're concerned about it, they're being collected on or whatnot, I'd encourage them to call me. We have a lot of lawsuits right now against payday lenders over the internet, and we're taking a look at these issues and trying to identify these companies, because
Also, the Attorney General will get involved in those situations as well, although the Attorney General won't bring a lawsuit in a client's behalf. That's for lawyers like yourself. And the Federal Trade Commission gets involved in some of these, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, and I think absolutely, and they're doing a good job. But Lori Swanson, we're very fortunate in Minnesota to have Lori Swanson, who's a very good Attorney General, who has been taking on the payday lending industry.
Very aggressive and straight from the shoulder.
Yeah, and she's got into some difficult issues. One of the issues that she recently took on was a company that said that they were operating on a reservation, a Native American reservation, and therefore, because of the sovereignty of those nations,
they're immune from laws.
Yeah, they're immune from our laws. They don't have to follow them here in the state of Minnesota. So she's delved into that issue, has determined that wasn't the case, and that in fact the owners of the payday lending company were using these Native American tribes as a front. And so she's done a wonderful job. But I would encourage anyone that took these loans out over the internet to call me. Let me take a look and just see if they were following, because we really are trying to put these people out of business. It's been a horrible abuse of Minnesota consumers. And
we also hear a lot about the fact that seniors are preyed upon. Seniors seem to be more vulnerable to some of these abuses. And in your experience, how can seniors protect themselves?
Well, it's a tragic situation that so many seniors can be the victim of these frauds. I think the number one message that I would have for seniors is, like for all consumers, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, or it always is.
Just about.
And also to not get caught up in a telephone solicitation or other things and the excitement that comes along with that. To take a deep breath and talk to family members, talk to an attorney, or talk to someone about, this is what this person's telling me, does that sound right to you? To really, I think, talk with people is the most important thing that they can do, because I think sometimes people get embarrassed, particularly seniors, that maybe they've been taken advantage of or they want to handle their own affairs. But I just think talking to people, saying, does this sound right? This person's telling me this, they're trying to sell me this, or they're saying I owe this, can be very beneficial.
What about reverse mortgages?
I have not got into the world of reverse mortgages yet, so I wouldn't venture to say that. I think, again, I know that it's an issue that's going to be affecting more and more seniors as they're trying to get some of the equity out of their home to help supplement Social Security as they go into retirement. Again, my overarching advice is that people really need to be careful, and the important thing is to always look at the fees that are being charged on the front end of these things.
And/or get good advice.
Absolutely.
Now, you generally give a free consultation, don't you?
I give free consultations. I think most attorneys that should be giving free consultations. I mean, in addition to being we're in a business, but we're also here to serve the public also, and that we should be doing that. So I'm happy to talk to people. I end up spending a lot of my day talking to people who have called with concerns, and sometimes I'm directing them other places where they can get some help, but we try to give people the right, and sometimes they become my clients, but we try to get people in the right direction. I think it's real important to try to find reputable sources of information. And one of the places to do that, again, is the Minnesota Attorney General's website is a good place to go, where they've got, they have documents for download on all types of topics, from everything from mortgage solicitations to debt to credit reporting to payday loans. I mean, there's just a series of things that people can learn and just become a little more educated about these things.
Speaking of credit reporting, now, credit reports are important. How do you keep people from going into your credit report? And what advice do you have for people about their credit reports?
Well, we handle a lot of credit reporting cases against the credit bureaus that have errors on people's credit reports, or creditors that have put inaccurate information on credit reports. I think the number one advice I'd have for people is to, once a year, check annualcreditreport.com, to get free copies of each of their 3 credit reports from Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. I would go through those credit reports and check them for accuracy. Make sure that the information on there is accurate, the accounts are yours, that you can verify all of those things. I have I have all kinds of clients who have had common names that have been combined with other people's information, inaccurate information, identity theft. But I think the most important thing is to be checking this once a year. Now, I'm going to say the name of the website again, because it's annualcreditreport.com. That is the truly free place that was set up under federal law for people to get their credit reports, not freecreditreport.com. Freecreditreport.com is not free. If you can,
So
a
it's
bit of
annual,
deception there.
Annual credit report.
Annualcreditreport.com. And again, if there are errors on your credit report, contact me and we do a free consultation and we talk with people about it, and we give them dispute letters, help people draft dispute letters to send out to do that. It's another area like the debt settlement area where I would say these places on the radio who are saying we're going to help repair your credit, we're going to help restore your credit. These companies want a lot of money, and they also want you to commit a fraud on the credit bureaus by saying that accounts that truly are yours are not yours, and you don't want to get involved with companies like that. These are
Quickly, what is your website?
People can come to me at www.minnesotaconsumerrights.com or HeaneyLaw.com. And
the phone number again?
952-933-9655. And so we're happy to talk with people anytime they have
Mark
issues.
Heaney out there protecting us, all of us. Thank you for coming in, and it's always an education to hear the things that are available to people that they don't know about. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it.
Let's see how this new sign off.